Hey everyone, so we're going to start a new lesson, and this lesson is all about angles and how to name them and solve for different parts of angles. And so within the first three self-checks in here, we're going to be using this kind of setup for angles where you have two parallel lines, which is this line that I just erased, and then the line below it. Those are considered two parallel lines, and then the other line that crosses through them is called a transversal. So when we have two parallel lines and a transversal, there's a couple of different things that we can figure out or find. And the first thing we're going to do is name all of the types of angles. So you have a cheat sheet with all of the different types of angles on there, but let me just go through them really fast. The first one that we're going to talk about is alternate interior, and I'm going to do it with different colors. So alternate interior angles are angles on the inside of those two parallel lines, but they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So an example would be like this guy and this guy. Those are considered alternate interior angles. You could also do, I'm going to do it and then I'll erase it. You could also do like this one and this one, but it would have to be this and this. So either of those pairs would be considered alternate interior. But just not to confuse you with all of the red lines, we're only going to write one example on there. Then we have something similar, but the next one is alternate exterior, which are, because it says exterior, we're going to do the opposite, or on the outside of the parallel lines, but on opposite sides of the transversal. So those are considered alternate exterior angles. Same thing goes for like, it could be that angle and this angle. Once again, I'm going to erase that just so we don't get confused by all the blue lines, but this is just one example of alternate exterior. Then the next one we're going to talk about is called corresponding. So corresponding angles are like on the same position on either parallel line. So a good example would be like this one and this one, because they're at the same position, but just one line down or one line up. Same thing goes for this one. There's several different examples for this. I'm just writing one example out there. Then the next one we're going to go through is called consecutive interior. We could also call it same side interior. It doesn't really matter. But when we do consecutive interior, they're on the inside of the two parallel lines, but they're on the same side. So a good example would be like this guy and this guy. All right, now let me get a different color. Let's do an orange. And there's two more. So the next one we're going to talk about is vertical. Vertical angles are opposites of each other. So a good example would be like this one and this one. Those are vertical angles because they're right across from each other. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is called adjacent. Adjacent angles are right next to each other. So a good example of that would be like this one right here and this one right here. They're right next to each other. And adjacent angles create 180 degrees or create a straight line. Okay, so those are all of the different angles that we're going to talk about. And now for the examples, we're just going to name the different types. So for the first example, we have parallel line and transversal like this, and we have X down here and Y up here. And what our goal is to find out is, okay, X and Y, what do they look like? Out of all of these 6 different options I have, what are they? They're on the outside and they're opposites of each other on either side of the transversal, which tells me that it's got to be an exterior because they're on the outsides of the parallel line. Well, there's only one option for exterior, and it's alternate exterior, and that's our answer. So alternate exterior. All right, now let's do the second example. The second example is again a transversal, and it doesn't matter which way the transversal goes, like if it's diagonal up to the left or up to the right, because it'll be the same no matter what. So on this one, we have the two X and Y, and they're on the same side of the transversal, and they're on the same position on the parallel lines, and when that happens, they're called corresponding. All right, and then the third example is once again parallel lines and transversal. That's all you're going to be seeing, and obviously I'm not a great artist, or else my lines would be more parallel or straight with each other. What you'll see on your self-check looks a lot more like parallel lines. Okay, so we have an X and a Y. They're right next to each other. This is not how I drew this, but on the examples, but these are called adjacent. The reason why these are adjacent is because they're right next to each other. They also create that straight line with each other. So if I use that line right there, X and Y create that straight line, and so that is considered adjacent. They're right next to each other. All right, and then the last example, number 4, it's like this, and we have Y up here and X down here. So when they're right across from each other in an angle, that is called vertical. All right, and those again are just 4 different types of angles, but here are all of your 6 angles, and that is how we name angles with parallel lines and transversals.